I was born in Granite Quarry, North Carolina, which is about 3 miles from Salisbury. I'm the sixth of eight children. Uh, I was born from a very young mom and a very old father. My mom was 6 years old when her mom died, and her mom was 26. So you see, we don't have longevity on her side. But my dad was 25 years older than my mom. And she grew up in North Wilkesboro around the Elkin, Jonesville area, and also in Richmond, Virginia. I went to the Granite Quarry Colored School, which is still there, and now it's called Grateful Heart Ministries. It's off Duns Mountain Road in Granite. That was that was a good experience, and I have absolutely good memories of Granite Quarry College School because we had teachers who looked like us. We had teachers who were interested in our well-being and in us knowing our history. In fact, one of the young ladies from Soldiers Memorial is the granddaughter of my principal at Granite Quarry. Her name was Rose Agri. That was the principal. And my dad said that she was our cousin. Her maiden name was Douglas, and my maiden name was Douglas. And Mrs. Agri always taught us that we could always be the best there is. And my mom echoed this at home. She said, in order for you to succeed, you have to be better than anyone. She said, and the reason you have to be is because you won't be able to get a job, you won't be able to do anything unless you're better. You can't just be average like some of the white kids are. You have to be better. Otherwise, you won't be accepted. And, that always bothered me because I'm saying, well, why do I always have to be better when I see others who aren't as good? That's how I felt. And she thought that was funny. She said, everyone is as good as everyone else. It just matters how you carry yourself. She said, it's about character. And that's where I learned that term. She said, your character is everything. Be good to everybody, and some will be good back, others won't. She said, but at least you know what you've done. And that's important. And I try to do that now. Sometimes I fail, but at least I am trying. I digressed from the young lady at Soldiers. Her name is Ramey. And we were at a meeting, Becoming the Beloved Community. And I looked at her because she's a little older than I am, but her grandmother and her aunt was my teacher, Miss Rosebud Agri. And she always talked about Ramey. And I thought that was the prettiest name. It was such an odd name. And when I saw Ramey, I said, I know your family. And she laughed. She said, I know. You're from Granite Quarry. And I said, yes. Her grandmother taught us Bible verses on Fridays. We had chapel. We learned different. I remember some of the scriptures. You learned the first Psalm. You learned the 23rd Psalm, the 121st Psalm. All these beautiful psalms and beautiful hymns we learned. And she always had positive things to tell us and to encourage us and to let us know that when we graduated from our school, that we would be going to Dunbar High School in East Spencer. And she explained to us about Paul Laurence Dunbar and how he was a Black poet. He was a poet laureate. And she said, and you always have to remember your history. Your history is very, very important. And you strive to be a good person and just to be knowledgeable about as many things about your history as you can remember. And I still try to do that. In fact, I have some books about Paul Dunbar. I've been in situations where I didn't want to be involved because of the way people could make you feel when you walked in. It wasn't about any spirituality. It wasn't about learning about God or about being good to each other. It was just about being there because it was what you were supposed to do on Sunday. Sunday was the day you were supposed to go to church. And so you went. But as far as getting anything out of it, many times, you didn't. You just did it because, your parents told you you had to go. And you went. But one of the positive things that I see here at St. Luke's, I rejoice when it's time to come to church. I have made so many friends here, people that I never thought would be friendly with me. And I was telling my husband that, when I went on the retreat, there were young ladies that I felt had not been warm toward me. I said, but as I experienced that retreat, I realized that because of my history and because of some of the things that I've experienced at other churches, I was being reticent to accept them also. And we were able to embrace each other and to just learn a different way of life and to come to church and see them and they wave to me and I wave to them. We look at each other and we smile and it's genuine. And that to me makes me excited to come and to want to be a part of. Well, I have a lot of memories regarding growing up in Granite Quarry and in Salisbury, coming to Salisbury. Particularly in Granite Quarry, my mom was a housekeeper. And we found after a while that the person she was working for at that time was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. And we didn't know that because he was nice to her. And his little girl was nice to my mom. But one day, mother said she came to her with a picture. It was a negative. And she said, Ola, look at this picture of me when I was a nigger. And mother asked her, well, what is a nigger? She said, I don't know. But my dad said, this is me when I was a nigger. And mother said, I looked at her and I said, come here, sweetheart. She said, I took the picture and I looked at it and I said, look, this is you. And she said, yeah, it is me. She said, this is a picture that didn't develop. She says, I'm sure you have a picture somewhere of this same picture, but it shows you instead of where the picture didn't come clear. And she said, oh. And she said, then she noticed that Leslie's face was, kind of looking puzzled. And she looked behind her, and Mr. Jones was standing in the door. And he said, Ola, I am so sorry about what Leslie said to you. And she said, Mr. Jones, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry that you would teach your child that. And she said she didn't know he was the Klansman, but he looked at her, and she said she felt a deeper respect that he gave her when she said that to him, because she was young. And she says, I decided then that I couldn't work for him, but I had no skills. So where do you go when you have no skills? She says, that's why you have to go to school, so that you can make choices. You don't have to stay in a place because you can't go anywhere else. But I'll tell you, my younger brother was one of the young men who integrated East Rowan. And you've heard of Mary Pons. Mary was my classmate, and her younger brother, Calvin, also integrated that school. They went there together. The thing that's different about our situation and hers is that the Klan burned a cross in front of their home. They did not burn a cross in front of ours. And the reason was that Mr. Jones had still protected us, even in his sheet with his cross. It's, you think of those things as you get older, and sometimes they hurt deeply, and sometimes you learn from them, and you teach younger people about it, because I think our history left us when integration started. And a lot of people will find it hard to believe that I would say that. I'm 75 years old. I learned about my history in school. When we went to Dunbar High School, also Black, I learned more about my history as a Black person. When the schools became integrated, our history went out the window. Our schools were closed or turned into something else because the white schools were always better prepared with their educational resources, things that we didn't have. So if you ever have the opportunity to see the Granite Quarry Colored School, you will see this absolutely beautiful building, but it's a small building. So I had friends who lived up the street from the Granite Quarry School, all white school. It was called Granite Quarry School because it was all white children. We were Granite Quarry College School, so that you would know that this is who you are. And they couldn't walk down the street to go to school there. We had to walk about a mile to go to school. And even after graduating from the 8th grade at my school, we had to take a bus to come into East Spencer to go to high school. And at the end of the day, we would get on the bus. It would take us back to the Granite Quarry School. This is initially back to the Granite Quarry School, where we would get off and we would walk home about a mile. And later, they allowed the bus to take us home. Would you believe, as far as Granite Quarry is from Gold Hill, North Carolina, which is on the other side of Rockwell, we had a Black family in Gold Hill. Those girls had to wait for the bus to come and pick them up. And we stopped to pick up the kids in Rockwell who lived across the street from the Rockwell High School to go into East Spencer to go to school. Why? Because of color. The only reason was because of color. And that I have not fully reconciled myself with. Just the other day, I was speaking with one of my friends, my political friends, and we were talking about the Fame statue. And I said, well, I think it should be in a cemetery. It's about people who are dead. I believe that it should be there, or it should be in a museum where anyone who's interested can go and look at it and read about it and do whatever they want. And she says, you know, Mary, I'm just a little tired of dealing with the past. And I said, okay. I said, I can understand that. I said, because your past is not my past. And so it's easy for you to say that. I said, why is it okay for the Jewish people to say never forget? Why is it okay that the Japanese people were given reparations for what happened to them? But it's not okay to talk about race with Black people. Why is it a problem? Why are we told to forget? There are so many things that I don't know about me. I don't know, I didn't know my grandparents. I don't even know how to go about looking for them because it was so long before my mom could find her family. And I'll tell you something positive that happened with my mom and me. We went to Salisbury one Saturday. We came to Salisbury, I keep forgetting that. And we were walking down the street, and that's when the streets they had so many beautiful stores. And we're walking and we're looking in windows and everything. And this woman and a little girl who looked like me walked past us. And I looked at Mother and said, that little girl looks like us. And she laughed. She said, she does. And the lady turned around and came back. She says, you know, I see you all every Saturday. She says, Viola, is that you? And my mom said, Cousin Minnie. My mom grew up with Cousin Minnie in their home after her mom died. And then, of course, they separated because my mom was raped and my oldest sister was a result of that rape. And when she got pregnant, they sent her to Virginia, to another part of her family. And she, being a little girl, she was 15. She remembered certain people, but she didn't remember exactly where they were. So all this time, we had been living here in Granite Quarry, And they had been living in Jonesville, North Carolina. And Cousin Minnie said, I knew it was you, but then again, I wasn't so sure. We didn't even know if you were still alive. And they hugged and they cried. And she said, we're coming to get you tomorrow. And we're going up. She said, Daddy is still alive. Mama is dead. She said, Aunt Maribel is alive. And I remember my mom talking about Aunt Maribel. Aunt Maribel was white with this long blonde hair. She was little and the bluest eyes. So when we went in, she grabbed Mother and she hugged her. They called my mom Red because she had this red hair. And she said, Red, my baby, I never thought I'd see you again. And Mother said, Aunt Maribel, and they're crying and everything. And I'm just standing around, saying, well, who is this white lady? And Mother said, come and hug your Aunt Maribel. And I said, Mother, who is the white lady? She said, this is your Aunt Maribel. And Aunt Maribel said, come here, sweetheart, and sat me on her lap. And she said, I'm just as colored as you are. And she hugged me and she kissed me. And that, I knew why my mom loved her so much. So we were able to reconnect with the family. She found her half-brothers and all of that. And that was really a positive thing that happened, being in Granite and in Salisbury, I would imagine, because she was able to reunite with her family. Well, we didn't have a bus in Granite Quarry. As I was telling you about Mr. Dude Robinson, our superintendent of our Sunday school would come around on Saturday mornings. He knew the people who would like to go into town, and you'd pay him a quarter and he'd drive you in. You got out on Lee Street, and then you go shopping and you'd come back to that same spot by Dr. Jones' office, and he would pick you up and take you home. But with respect to our doctor, I remember our doctor being Dr. Brown in Faith. Faith has a beautiful name, but it doesn't have pleasant memories because people would tell you, be out of faith before dark. And they meant it because many Black people were killed in Faith. And I remember we would go to the doctor. You didn't have an appointment. He would just tell you, well, you can come on Saturday to see me. I'll be open on Saturday. And because we didn't have to go to school on Saturday, we would go. And no matter, you could be the first ones there. And you sat there until somebody white came in. And they went in and they were treated or whatever. And they left. And you'd sit there. And then more white people would come in. And they would be treated. And you'd sit there until he was done with white people. And then you were seen. I never understood it, and I still don't. And I still don't feel comfortable talking about that because it still makes me angry. And no matter how often I try to forget about it, I don't. And there are times when George and I have gone to restaurants and we're standing there and they ask, do you want separate bills? And I said, only if he's not going home, Yes, we want one bill. I'm his wife. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I said, this is the 21st century. I think the Jim Crow laws were established just to keep Black people from being accomplished people. The Jim Crow laws came about to make caricatures of Black people. Because I understand from people who knew, and that in the North, it started there too, because white people would be in blackface, and that was so funny. They did their faces to make how they felt black people looked to them. Right there in Granite Quarry, I remember my sister sending my older brother to the post office to get postcards for her. And she told him, because she was belonged to the Missionary Society, and she said, I want you to get these postcards for me because we're going to be sending them out, inviting people to come to a meeting. And when he came back, he had these postcards, and they had black people eating watermelons. They had them, I mean, those were the postcards that he was sold. Because regular postcards, why would you want a regular postcard, you know? And she said, well, we're going to take these back because we don't want these. And he said, why? They're funny, you know? Because they made us, those laws made us feel like it was okay. You couldn't vote. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't go to the bathroom in the stores that had bathrooms. You had the colored and white water fountains. So if there was a line at the colored fountain, you had to wait, even if there was no one at the white fountain. And I remember an experience with my mom. We were at S&H Crest. I don't even go into the shop that's in that building anymore because we were in there and I was thirsty. And people were drinking from the colored fountain. And Mother said, oh, just step up on that there were little steps, and drink some water there. So I did. And this man came out of nowhere, ranting and raving. She's not supposed to be drinking from that fountain. Can't you read? That says white. And my mom said, I wanted her to taste the white water today to see if there's a difference. And he was shocked. He just kept looking at her. And she said, well, go on and drink. And I was drinking. And the more I drank, the more I wanted to drink. And so she told me, that's enough. And that's how it was. You know, you could buy at Woolworth's, you could buy a drink, but you couldn't sit there and drink it. You could buy a sandwich, but you couldn't eat it in there. Couldn't go to the bathroom, couldn't drink water because of the laws. And it was legal. That's the sad part. It was legal to treat people as though they were animals and as though they were non-existent. And a lot of people wonder now, because of a lack of education, some people don't want to understand what happened. And some feel better if they don't accept what happened in the past. If you don't acknowledge it, it didn't happen. And that's the same as with the Holocaust. If you say it didn't happen and you don't talk about it, then 9 times out of 9, it didn't happen. So Jim Crow is still alive and well, I do believe. I mean, just this morning, they had on the news that in Florida, where the constituents had voted to let felons who had finished their time, let them vote. The legislature said only if they pay back the monies that were used during their incarceration would they be allowed to vote? What is that but Jim Crow? Jim Crow is alive. If I had an opportunity just to talk to people who they mainly mistreated my mom. And that is what I witnessed. And she was wonderful, where she couldn't buy a certain color lipstick, only one color, which was very dark. Where she couldn't buy regular stockings. She had to buy these that were called Red Fox stockings with a seam up the back. That was what she was sold. She could not make a decision. The decisions had already been made for her. I would ask them, how would you feel if I treated you that way? What would you think of saying to me at this time? What would you want me to say to you? Would you want me to be forgiving? I think I'm trying to forgive. But sometimes if you just listen to each other's story, I think that's what would make a difference. I have a story and you have a story. Just quietly listen to my story and try to feel what I'm feeling. And let me do the same for you. I think what's missing a lot in this world now is empathy. We don't have empathy for each other. We get angry if someone talks about their issues, and we walk away from it, just as ignorant as we were when we started out. If we would just take time to listen, I think we would have a more forgiving place. We would have the opportunity to share. I would like to share something with you. George and I went to a study on Martin Luther King's letters. This was right before Lent. And there was this woman, she didn't speak to me again because we were talking about racism. And she said, I beg to differ with you because there was racism on both sides. And I said, where have I heard that before? I thought it was a little bit amusing. She didn't. She told us about how she had gone to Ghana. Her daughter is a missionary there. And she said, and when I went, they just treated me like I was nothing. I said, welcome to the club. How does it feel? How did it make you feel? I said, when you start thinking about how Black people don't have an issue, think about what happened to you when you were out of your area of comfort. You were out of your comfort zone. How did you feel? I said, well, think about it. We feel that way too. Because bottom line is we're just people. Healing these divisions is still somewhat difficult. Because there are those of us who want to keep the wound open, and there are those of us who want to close the wound and say what never existed. So until we sit down and we talk to each other, it's never going to heal. It will never heal as long as we don't acknowledge that how we're feeling. And many times we don't. We sit back and we say, well, I don't believe that happened, or it never happened in Rowan County. This is what we've been told. There was no slavery in North Carolina or in Rowan County. And I'm saying the dumbing down of America. That's what is happening. But until we take the time to sit down, face our dragons, and learn how to deal with them, and to deal with each other, and to make each other know that there is healing. And I love a song, "There is a balm in Gilead," and it will heal if we just take the time to spend. And it will take time, and it does take time, but we will continue to perish if we don't teach each other about our different feelings and our differences. I feel that if the churches come together as they did during the civil rights movement, or as they tried to during the civil rights movement, if the churches take the lead in pulling people together and having meetings and having different times to sit down and talk about how we're feeling, what can we do to make a change. I think even with the possibility of Father Robert doing a message over at Soldiers, Dr. Anderson coming here and speaking with our congregation, I think it's things like that that would make us all get closer together. Because in doing that, we get to learn about each other. And when we learn about each other, it makes us all stronger. I just want to say one thing that I am happy about, that Granite Quarry grew to a point where they could have a Black mayor, my classmate, Mary Pons. I'd like to say Jean Kennedy, she's my classmate. And she was voted in to be on the Board of Education. So things are changing gradually. But you see, with Mary and Jean, we're all 75 years old. We need to do things for people who are younger so that they can encourage people who are younger than them and maybe make a difference, make a better change in this world and a better change here in this area. The fact that we could have a Black mayor, that shows that there's change and that there is room for change. But many times I read in the letters to the Post where some people say, well, instead of the mayor being concerned about what's happening in this part and that part with the murders and all of that, she should be concerned about Longstreet. Well, all criminality doesn't take place on Longstreet, and it would be nice if people could realize that it's not just Black crime, that crime is crime, murder is murder, and it doesn't come in colors. Well, I think that what we need to do, because a lot of us, Black and white, still don't want to tell the truth about what happened with us and what is still happening. You see, one Black person's story is not another Black person's story. Most of our teachers lived here in town. I had 2 teachers in Granite Quarry. The others were here on Horace Street, Monroe Street. And so, of course, you know, you think that you have to be somewhere else in order to make a difference. I felt that way. I went to school in Concord, Barbara Scotia College, and I went there for 3 years. The 4th year, I didn't go back. I went to New York, and I graduated college in New York. But I had a good education. I had a good background. I like telling people about where I'm from. I had never planned to ever come back here to live. Never, ever. Because of things that I saw, ways that I saw people being treated. I remember, I have to tell the truth about this, over at the Granite Quarry College School, we had, on Friday mornings, I told you, we had the we called it chapel, and all the classes would come, we would sing hymns, we would recite the scriptures. But I remember one particular thing. A man came, he was going to do tricks. And there was this guy, Jimmy, he lived in Rockwell. The man called him up to the stage, and he said, the reason I called him up here is because he looks just like a monkey. And the thing that hurts now is that all of us laughed. We laughed because we were, with the exception of our principal and our teachers, we were being taught that you're just not important. Anybody can say anything to you, and you laugh about it to mask the pain. And even now, sometimes things are said that you mask by not responding, but you're holding it inside. And as long as you're holding it inside, you're destroying yourself, because you can't heal if you're holding it. And a lot of, as I said, a lot of us have different stories. A lot of Black people had really, really good lives, despite the fact that Jim Crow was in effect. And it's because they had the education, some had money, and some had different aspects of their lives. And then there were those of us who had no money. So we had to study very, very hard, and to make sure that that we mattered. And if you had a good parent or good parents, you were taught to love yourself. And I think that makes all the difference. If you teach your children to love themselves, then they feel confident, they feel good about them. But then there are others who don't tell their children the truth. Like I met this young man, and he said that, oh, I grew up, my father did this when he was, he was well-to-do, and this was a very fair-skinned man. And he said, and all of my little friends were white. And I was so hurt when we became 6 years of age, and I couldn't go to school with them. I had to go to the colored school. And before I knew it, I said, your father did you a disservice. He tricked you into thinking that you mattered to everyone. You only mattered to him and your family. Because suddenly your friends were no longer your friends. They couldn't be seen with you. They couldn't play with you. They couldn't go to school with you. So what are you saying? Does that make you feel good? Does it make you feel better than? I said, I think not. He doesn't speak to me.